Question 1. A museum sells limited tickets for a special exhibition. Each visitor has a maximum amount they are willing to pay before choosing an alternative activity. Which concept best describes this maximum amount? A. Equilibrium quantity. B. Producer surplus. C. Reservation price. D. Supply elasticity. The correct answer is C. Let's break down the idea behind this question. A reservation price is the highest amount a buyer is willing to pay for a good or service before deciding not to buy it. In this case, each museum visitor has a personal maximum price they would accept before choosing another activity. That maximum willingness to pay is the reservation price. Equilibrium quantity is the amount bought and sold at the market equilibrium, so option A is not correct. Producer surplus refers to the benefit sellers receive when they sell above the minimum price they are willing to accept, so option B is not correct. Supply elasticity measures how responsive quantity supplied is to a price change, so option D is also not correct. The key idea is that reservation price focuses on the buyer's maximum willingness to pay. Question 2. Which statement best describes consumer surplus? A. The total revenue received by sellers. B. The difference between what consumers are willing to pay and what they actually pay. C. The excess of quantity supplied over quantity demanded. D. The cost saved by firms after adopting technology. The correct answer is B. Here is the main idea behind consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the extra benefit buyers receive when they pay less than the maximum amount they were willing to pay. For example, if a visitor is willing to pay $50 for a ticket, but buys it for $35, the $15 difference is consumer surplus. Option A describes seller revenue, not buyer benefit. Option C describes a surplus in the market where supply is greater than demand. Option D refers to production cost savings, which is related to firms rather than consumers. The key point is that consumer surplus measures the buyer's gain from paying below their reservation price. Question 3. A group of students values a textbook differently. Some would pay a high price, while others would buy only at a low price. The market demand curve reflects these differences primarily by showing A. The production cost of each textbook, B. The quantities consumers are willing to buy at alternative prices, C. The total number of sellers in the market, D. The fixed income of every student. The correct answer is B. Now let's connect this to how a demand curve works. A market demand curve shows the quantities consumers are willing and able to buy at different possible prices. Since students value the textbook differently, more students may buy it when the price is low, while fewer may buy it when the price is high. Option A is about production cost, which belongs more to supply decisions. Option C focuses on sellers, not buyers. Option D is not correct because demand does not assume every consumer has the same fixed income. The important point is that a demand curve summarizes buyer behavior across alternative prices. Question 4. A competitive market produces the quantity at which marginal benefit equals marginal cost. What welfare conclusion follows? A. Producer surplus is eliminated. B. Consumer surplus becomes zero. C. Shortage becomes permanent. D. Total surplus is maximized. The correct answer is D. Let's focus on the welfare result here. When marginal benefit equals marginal cost, the market is producing the efficient quantity. This means the value consumers place on the last unit equals the cost of producing that unit. At this point, total surplus is maximized because no additional mutually beneficial trades are being missed and no inefficient units are being produced. Option A is not correct because producer surplus can still exist. Option B is not correct because consumer surplus can also still exist. Option C is not correct because a permanent shortage would mean quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. The main conclusion is that allocative efficiency maximizes total surplus. Question 5. A firm is willing to sell a unit of output for a minimum acceptable price, but the market price is higher. What does the firm gain from selling the unit? A. Producer surplus. B. Consumer surplus. C. Marginal utility. D. Excess demand. The correct answer is A. Let's look at this from the seller side. Producer surplus is the extra benefit a seller receives when the market price is higher than the minimum price the seller was willing to accept. For example, if a firm is willing to sell a unit for $20, but receives $30 in the market, the $10 difference is producer surplus. Option B is not correct because consumer surplus belongs to buyers, not sellers. Option C refers to the extra satisfaction from consuming one more unit. Option D describes a shortage situation where quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. The main idea is that producer surplus measures the seller's gain from receiving more than the minimum acceptable price. Question 6. A city sets a legal maximum fare for private shuttle rides below the market clearing level. Drivers reduce operating hours while many riders continue seeking rides. Which deeper economic effect is most likely? A. Non-price rationing and potential misallocation. B. Efficient allocation to riders with the highest willingness to pay. C. Elimination of all opportunity costs. D. Automatic expansion of driver participation. The correct answer is A. Here's what happens when price is restricted below equilibrium. A legal maximum price below the market clearing level creates a shortage because riders want more shuttle rides than drivers are willing to provide. Since price cannot fully ration the limited rides, access may depend on waiting time, personal connections, luck, who requests a ride first. That is non-price rationing, and it can misallocate rides away from people who value them most. Option B is not correct because the price ceiling prevents normal price-based allocation. Option C is wrong because opportunity costs still exist. Option D is also wrong because a lower fare usually discourages driver participation rather than expanding it. The key result is that binding price ceilings often create shortages and non-price rationing. Question 7. Evaluate each statement as true or false. Consumer surplus can exist even when buyers pay the same market price. The correct answer is true. Producer surplus measures the gap between market price and sellers' minimum acceptable prices. The correct answer is true. Total surplus is maximized when marginal benefit is below marginal cost. The correct answer is false. Reservation price refers only to the seller's accounting profit. The correct answer is false. Now let's clarify each statement carefully. Consumer surplus can exist at a common market price because different buyers may have different maximum willingness to pay. Buyers who value the good more than the price they pay receive a surplus. Producer surplus is correctly described as the difference between the market price sellers receive and the minimum price they would accept. However, total surplus is maximized when marginal benefit equals marginal cost, not when marginal benefit is below marginal cost. Reservation price is also broader than seller profit because it can refer to a buyer's maximum willingness to pay or a seller's minimum acceptable price. The main point is that surplus measures the gains from exchange when buyers and sellers trade on terms better than their reservation prices. Question 8. A university introduces a charge on each parking permit sold. The charge creates a gap between what students pay and what the university receives. What is this gap called in market analysis? A. Utility premium. B. Equilibrium surplus. C. Tax wedge. D. Demand reserve. The correct answer is C. Let's connect the charge to the market price difference. A tax wedge is the gap created between the price buyers pay and the price sellers receive after a tax or charge is applied. In this case, students pay more for the parking permit, while the university receives less than the total amount paid because part of the payment is taken as the charge. Option A is not correct because utility premium is not the standard term for this market gap. Option B is wrong because equilibrium surplus does not describe a buyer-seller price separation. Option D is also wrong because demand reserve is not the relevant market concept. The key idea is that a tax wedge separates the buyer's price from the seller's received price. Question 9. Which outcome is most closely associated with a per unit tax in a competitive market? A. It usually increases the quantity traded. B. It removes the need for prices. C. It guarantees equal burden on buyers and sellers. D. It creates deadweight loss by preventing mutually beneficial trades. The correct answer is D. Let's focus on the effect of the tax on market exchange. A per unit tax raises the effective cost of trading, creating a wedge between what buyers pay and what sellers receive. As a result, some trades that would have benefited both buyers and sellers no longer take place. This lost value is called deadweight loss. Option A is not correct because a tax usually reduces the quantity traded rather than increasing it. Option B is wrong because prices are still needed to guide market decisions. Option C is also wrong because the tax burden depends on relative demand and supply elasticity, so it is not automatically shared equally. The key result is that a per-unit tax can reduce efficient trade and create deadweight loss. Question 10. A government subsidy lowers the effective cost of producing solar panels. What is the likely direct market effect holding demand constant? A. Demand shifts leftward. B. Market quantity becomes zero. C. Supply shifts rightward. D. Producer willingness to sell disappears. The correct answer is C. Let's follow the effect from cost to supply. A subsidy lowers the effective production cost for firms. When production becomes cheaper, producers are willing to sell more solar panels at each possible market price. This causes the supply curve to shift rightward. Option A is not correct because the subsidy affects producers directly, not consumer demand. Option B is wrong because lower production costs would not normally make market quantity zero. Option D is also wrong because the subsidy encourages producer participation rather than making willingness to sell disappear. The main idea is that lower production cost increases supply. Question 11. Which factor determines how the burden of a tax is divided between buyers and sellers? A. The legal wording of the tax alone. B. The number of available product colors. C. Relative price elasticities of demand and supply. D. The original accounting profit of sellers only. The correct answer is C. Let's look at what really controls tax burden. Tax incidence depends on the relative price elasticities of demand and supply. The less elastic side of the market usually bears more of the tax burden because it is less able to change behavior when price changes. Option A is not correct because the legal responsibility for paying the tax does not determine who ultimately bears the economic burden. Option B is unrelated to tax incidence. Option D is also wrong because sellers' original accounting profit alone does not determine how the tax burden is shared. The key point is that tax burden depends on how responsive buyers and sellers are to price changes. Question 12. A firm expects the price of its product to rise next month. It stores part of its current output instead of selling immediately. What effect may this have on the current market? A. Current demand must increase. B. Current consumer surplus must rise. C. Current shortage must disappear. D. Current supply may decrease. The correct answer is D. Let's connect future price expectations to current supply. When a firm expects a higher price in the future, it may hold back some of its current output so it can sell later at a better price. This reduces the amount available for sale in the current market, so current supply may decrease. Option A is not correct because the firm's expectation affects supply, not necessarily demand. Option B is wrong because lower current supply may raise prices and reduce consumer surplus. Option C is also wrong because withholding output would not automatically eliminate a shortage. The key idea is that expectations about future prices can change sellers' current supply decisions. Question 13. A consumer expects laptop prices to rise soon and decides to buy now. Which market change may result today? A. Current supply decreases because input prices fall. B. Current demand decreases due to substitution. C. Current producer surplus becomes impossible. D. Current demand increases due to expectations. The correct answer is D. Let's look at how expectations affect buying behavior. When consumers expect prices to rise in the future, they may bring their purchases forward and buy now. This increases current demand because more buyers enter the market today instead of waiting. Option A is not correct because the situation describes consumer expectations, not a fall in input prices for producers. Option B is wrong because expecting higher future prices usually increases current demand rather than reducing it. Option C is also wrong because producer surplus can still exist when sellers receive more than their minimum acceptable price. The main point is that expected future price increases can raise current demand. Question 14. Two goods are usually consumed together. A large increase in the price of one reduces demand for the other. What relationship do the goods have? A. Complementary goods. B. Substitute goods. C. Inferior goods. D. Public goods. The correct answer is A. Let's connect the two goods through consumer behavior. Complementary goods are goods that are commonly used together, so demand for one is linked to demand for the other. When the price of one complement rises, consumers buy less of it, and this can reduce demand for the related good as well. Option B is not correct because substitute goods are used in place of each other, so a price increase for one usually raises demand for the other. Option C describes goods whose demand falls when income rises. Option D describes goods that are generally non-excludable and non-rival. The key idea is that complements have connected demand because they are consumed jointly. Question 15. A consumer buys more public transport passes after income falls, assuming fares remain unchanged. Which classification may apply to public transport for this consumer? A. Inferior good. B. Normal good. C. Luxury good. D. Perfect substitute. The correct answer is A. Let's link income changes to demand behavior. An inferior good is a good whose demand increases when a consumer's income falls. In this case, the consumer buys more public transport passes after having less income. So public transport may be acting as an inferior good for that consumer. Option B is not correct because demand for a normal good usually rises when income rises. Option C is wrong because luxury goods are typically highly responsive to income increases. Option D is also wrong because a perfect substitute means one good can replace another at a constant trade-off, which is not the classification being tested here. The main idea is that inferior goods have demand that moves opposite to income. Question 16. Which statement best describes a given good? A good whose demand always rises when income increases. B, a good with perfectly elastic supply. C, a good that cannot be represented in consumer theory. D, a good for which quantity demanded rises when its price rises because the income effect dominates. The correct answer is D. Let's separate this special case from normal demand behavior. A given good is a special type of inferior good where quantity demanded rises when its price rises. This happens because the income effect is strong enough to dominate the substitution effect. Option A is not correct because that describes a normal good, not a given good. Option B is wrong because supply elasticity is not the defining feature. Option C is also wrong because given goods can be analyzed in consumer theory. The main point is that a given good is an unusual case where a higher price can lead to a higher quantity demanded. Question 17. A low-income household spends much of its budget on a staple food. When the staple becomes more expensive, the household cuts back on higher quality foods and buys more of the staple. Which explanation is most appropriate? A, the good behaves like a given good in this context. B, the substitution effect dominates the income effect. C, supply has become perfectly elastic. D, producer surplus has turned negative. The correct answer is A. Let's connect the household's budget pressure to its buying decision. The staple food behaves like a given good in this situation because the price increase sharply reduces the household's purchasing power. Since the household can no longer afford as much higher quality food, it buys more of the cheaper staple, even though the staple's price has risen. Option B is not correct because given behavior occurs when the income effect dominates the substitution effect, not the other way around. Option C is wrong because the question is about demand behavior, not supply elasticity. Option D is also wrong because producer surplus does not become negative simply because consumers change their purchases. The key is that strong income effects can make an inferior staple show given behavior. Question 18. Evaluate each statement as true or false. A tax wedge can reduce the quantity traded in a market. The correct answer is true. The side legally responsible for paying a tax always bears the full economic burden. The correct answer is false. Complements are goods that tend to be consumed together. The correct answer is true. A given good violates the general law of demand under specific conditions. The correct answer is true. Now let's clarify the economic reasoning behind these answers. A tax wedge can reduce the quantity traded because it raises the effective price paid by buyers and lowers the effective price received by sellers, which discourages some beneficial exchanges. The legal assignment of a tax does not determine the full economic burden because tax incidence depends on the relative elasticities of demand and supply. Complements are goods used together, so demand for one is connected to demand for the other. A given good is a rare case where a price increase causes quantity demanded to rise because the income effect dominates the substitution effect. The main lesson is that taxes, related goods, and unusual demand behavior all depend on how buyers and sellers respond to incentives. Question 19. Which concept separates the effect of a price change into a change in relative attractiveness and a change in purchasing power? A. Producer surplus and shortage effects. B. Supply and inventory effects. C. Income and substitution effects. D. Price ceiling and price floor effects. The correct answer is C. Let's separate the two parts of a price change. The substitution effect explains how a price change affects the relative attractiveness of a good compared with other goods. When a good becomes cheaper, consumers may substitute toward it. The income effect explains how the same price change affects real purchasing power. If a good becomes cheaper, consumers can afford more with the same income. Option A is not correct because producer surplus and shortages do not separate buyer response into these two parts. Option B focuses on seller-side supply issues. Option D describes government price controls, not the breakdown of a consumer's response to price changes. The key idea is that price changes affect both relative choices and purchasing power. Question 20. A consumer switches from cinema visits to home streaming after cinema tickets become more expensive. Which effect is most directly illustrated? A. Substitution effect. B. Producer surplus effect. C. Supply shock effect. D. Cobweb effect. The correct answer is A. Let's focus on the change in relative attractiveness. The substitution effect occurs when consumers respond to a price increase by switching toward a relatively cheaper alternative. In this case, cinema visits become more expensive, so the consumer chooses home streaming instead. Option B is not correct because producer surplus refers to sellers' gain from receiving more than their minimum acceptable price. Option C is wrong because a supply shock changes production conditions, not the consumer's choice between alternatives. Option D refers to delayed supply responses that can create price and quantity fluctuations over time. The main idea is that the consumer is substituting away from the relatively more expensive option. Question 21. After food prices increase, a household feels poor and reduces spending on several goods. Which effect is being emphasized? A. Market clearing effect. B. Income effect. C. Inventory effect. D. Entry effect. The correct answer is B. Let's connect the price increase to purchasing power. The income effect describes how a price change affects a consumer's real purchasing power. When food prices rise, the household's same income buys less than before, so the household feels poorer and may reduce spending on several goods. Option A is not correct because market clearing refers to the price and quantity where demand equals supply. Option C is wrong because inventory effects concern stock held by firms or sellers. Option D is also wrong because entry effect relates to firms entering a market. The main idea is that higher prices can reduce real purchasing power, which is exactly what the income effect captures. Question 22. Which statement best describes an indifference curve? A. It shows all quantities firms can produce at a given cost. B. It shows the market price at which supply equals demand. C. It shows the legal limits placed on consumer purchases. D. It shows combinations of goods that give the consumer equal satisfaction. The correct answer is D. D. Let's focus on what the curve represents for the consumer. An indifference curve shows different combinations of goods that give a consumer the same level of satisfaction. The consumer is indifferent among those bundles because each bundle provides equal utility. Option A is not correct because it describes production possibilities or cost conditions for firms, not consumer preferences. Option B is wrong because market equilibrium is about supply and demand meeting. Option C is also wrong because legal purchase limits are government restrictions, not preference rankings. The key idea is that an indifference curve maps equal satisfaction across different consumption bundles. Question 23. A consumer is willing to give up fewer units of one good to obtain additional units of another as consumption changes along an indifference curve. What principle is reflected? A. Increasing producer surplus. B. Diminishing marginal rate of substitution. C. Perfectly elastic supply. D. Excess demand adjustment. The correct answer is B. Let's connect this to the shape of consumer preferences. Diminishing marginal rate of substitution means a consumer becomes less willing to give up one good to gain extra units of another, as they already have more of that second good. This is why many indifference curves are bowed inward. Option A is not correct because producer surplus relates to sellers, not consumer trade-offs. Option C is wrong because perfectly elastic supply describes producer response to price. Option D is also wrong because excess demand adjustment refers to market shortages and price movement. The key idea is that diminishing marginal rate of substitution reflects changing willingness to trade one good for another. Question 24. Which condition is usually associated with an interior consumer optimum? A. Marginal utility is negative for every good. B. Marginal rate of substitution equals the price ratio. C. Consumer surplus equals producer surplus. D. Supply equals demand in every related market. The correct answer is B. Let's connect the consumer's preferences to the market trade-off. At an interior consumer optimum, the consumer chooses a bundle where their willingness to trade one good for another matches the trade-off set by market prices. This means the marginal rate of substitution equals the price ratio. Option A is not correct because consumer choice usually assumes positive marginal utility for goods. Option C is wrong because equality between consumer surplus and producer surplus is not required for consumer optimization. Option D is also wrong because supply and demand equilibrium is a market condition, not the individual consumer's optimum condition. The key idea is that the best interior bundle occurs where the consumer's personal trade-off equals the market trade-off. Question 25. A consumer spends all available income on one good because the other good gives too little satisfaction relative to its price. What type of solution may this represent? A. Market surplus. B. Cobweb equilibrium. C. Corner solution. D. Producer equilibrium. The correct answer is C. Let's connect the spending choice to the type of optimum. A corner solution occurs when the consumer's optimal bundle includes zero consumption of at least one good. In this case, the consumer spends all available income on one good because the other good does not provide enough satisfaction relative to its price. Option A is not correct because market surplus refers to excess quantity supplied. Option B is wrong because cobweb equilibrium deals with delayed supply responses over time. Option D is also wrong because producer equilibrium concerns firms, not consumer choice. The key idea is that choosing only one good and none of the other can represent a corner solution. Question 26. A student compares two bundles of snacks and drinks. The student chooses one bundle when both were affordable. What method uses this observed choice to infer preference? A. Revealed preference analysis. B. Cost push analysis. C. Inventory adjustment analysis. D. Supply-side aggregation. The correct answer is A. Let's focus on what the student's actual choice tells us. Revealed preference analysis uses observed consumer choices to infer what the consumer prefers. Since both bundles were affordable and the student selected one, the chosen bundle is treated as preferred to the alternative under those conditions. Option B is not correct because cost push analysis relates to rising production costs and price pressure. Option C is wrong because inventory adjustment concerns stock management, usually by firms. Option D is also wrong because supply-side aggregation combines production or supply information, not consumer preference. The key idea is that revealed preference looks at choices people actually make to understand their preferences. Question 27. Which axiom requires that if a consumer prefers bundle A to bundle B and bundle B to bundle C, then the consumer should prefer A to C? A. Transitivity. B. Completeness. C. Non-satiation. D. Convexity. The correct answer is A. Let's focus on consistency in consumer preferences. Transitivity means that preferences should follow a consistent order. If a consumer prefers bundle A to bundle B and also prefers bundle B to bundle C, then the consumer should prefer bundle A to bundle C. Option B is not correct because completeness means the consumer can compare any two bundles. Option C is wrong because non-satiation means more of a desirable good is generally preferred to less. Option D is also wrong because convexity means consumers tend to prefer balanced combinations of goods rather than extreme bundles. The main idea is that transitivity keeps preference rankings logically consistent. Question 28. A consumer always prefers having more of a desirable good when all else is unchanged. Which preference assumption is most relevant? A. Convexity. B. Monotonicity. C. Disequilibrium. Tax incidence. The correct answer is B. Let's connect the assumption to consumer preference behavior. Monotonicity means that for a desirable good, more is preferred to less when everything else stays the same. So if a consumer can have more of a good without giving up anything else, the consumer would prefer the larger amount. Option A is not correct because convexity means consumers often prefer balanced bundles rather than extreme bundles. Option C is wrong because disequilibrium describes a market situation where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are not equal. Option D is also wrong because tax incidence explains how a tax burden is divided between buyers and sellers. The main idea is that monotonicity captures the preference for more of a desirable good. Question 29. Evaluate each statement as true or false. An indifference curve represents equal utility combinations. The correct answer is true. A corner solution requires the consumer to buy positive quantities of all goods. The correct answer is false. Transitivity supports consistent preference ranking. The correct answer is true. Revealed preference uses observed choices to infer preferences. The correct answer is true. Let's clarify these consumer choice concepts one by one. An indifference curve shows combinations of goods that give the consumer the same level of satisfaction. A corner solution does not require positive quantities of all goods because it occurs when the optimal bundle includes zero consumption of at least one good. Transitivity supports consistent preference ranking by requiring preferences to follow a logical order. Revealed preference uses actual choices to infer what consumers prefer when alternatives are available. The main idea is that consumer theory connects preference assumptions, observed choices, and optimal consumption decisions. Question 30. Which statement best explains why indifference curves for well-behaved preferences do not cross? A. Crossing would make supply perfectly elastic. B. Crossing would eliminate all budget constraints. C. Crossing would require prices to be fixed by law. D. Crossing would imply inconsistent rankings of the same bundles. The correct answer is D. Let's focus on consistency in preference rankings. Indifference curves show bundles that give the consumer equal satisfaction. If two indifference curves crossed, the same bundle would appear to give two different levels of satisfaction, which creates an inconsistent ranking. Option A is not correct because supply elasticity is a producer-side concept. Option B is wrong because crossing indifference curves does not remove the consumer's budget constraint. Option C is also wrong because legal price controls are unrelated to the shape of indifference curves. The main idea is that non-crossing indifference curves preserve consistent consumer preferences. Question 31. A consumer's budget line rotates inward after the price of one good rises while income and the other goods price remain unchanged. What has changed? A. The consumer's preference ranking only. B. The producer's technology only. C. The relative price of the affected good. D. The market supply curve only. The correct answer is C. Let's connect the budget line of affordability. When the price of one good rises, while income and the other goods price stay the same, the consumer can afford less of the more expensive good. This changes the relative price between the two goods and causes the budget line to rotate inward around the intercept of the unchanged good. Option A is not correct because the consumer's preferences do not have to change. Option B is wrong because producer technology is unrelated to the consumer's budget line. Option D is also wrong because the supply curve is not what determines the consumer's budget constraint. The key idea is that a change in one good's price changes the slope of the budget line. Question 32. Which curve traces optimal consumption bundles as income changes while prices remain constant? A. Price consumption curve. B. Income consumption curve. C. Engel curve path. D. Supply response curve. The correct answer is B. Let's focus on what changes and what stays constant. An income consumption curve traces the consumer's optimal bundles as income changes while prices remain constant. It shows how the consumer adjusts the combination of goods purchased when purchasing power rises or falls. Option A is not correct because a price consumption curve traces optimal bundles when the price of one good changes. Option C is related, but an Engel curve usually shows the relationship between income and then the quantity demanded of one good, not the full bundle of goods. Option D is wrong because a supply response curve concerns producer behavior, not consumer choice. The key idea is that the income consumption curve follows optimal consumption choices as income changes. Question 33. Which curve relates the quantity demanded of a good to consumer income, holding other factors constant? A. Engel curve. B. Supply curve. C. Isoquant. D. Deadweight curve. The correct answer is A. Let's connect income changes to the quantity demanded of one good. An Engel curve shows the relationship between consumer income and the quantity demanded of a particular good, while other factors are held constant. It helps show whether demand rises, falls, or changes at a different rate as income changes. Option B is not correct because a supply curve shows how much producers are willing to sell at different prices. Option C is wrong because an isoquant shows combinations of inputs that produce the same output. Option D is also wrong because deadweight curve is not the standard term for this relationship. The key idea is that an Engel curve links income to quantity demanded for a specific good. Question 34. A consumer's optimal demand for a good falls as income rises with prices unchanged. What does this imply? A. The good is inferior for that consumer over the relevant income range. B. The good must be a complement. C. The good must have perfectly elastic demand. D. The good has no marginal utility. The correct answer is A. Let's connect the income change to the type of good. An inferior good is a good whose demand falls when consumer income rises, holding prices unchanged. In this case, the consumer buys less of the good as income increases, so the good is inferior for that consumer over that income range. Option B is not correct because complements are goods used together, and that relationship depends on how the demand for one good responds to the price of another. Option C is wrong because perfectly elastic demand refers to extreme responsiveness to price, not income. Option D is also wrong because falling demand as income rises does not mean the good has no marginal utility. The main idea is that inferior goods have demand that moves opposite to income. Question 35. Which process derives market demand from individual consumer demands? A. Vertical summation of prices at each quantity. B. Subtracting supply from each consumer's demand. C. Averaging producer costs across firms. D. Horizontal summation of quantities demanded at each price. The correct answer is D. Let's connect individual demand to total market demand. Market demand is derived by adding the quantities demanded by all individual consumers at each possible price. This is called horizontal summation because at a given price, we move across the individual demand curves and add the quantities together. Option A is not correct because vertical summation adds prices and is not how ordinary private good market demand is formed. Option B is wrong because demand is not found by subtracting supply from consumer demand. Option C is also wrong because producer costs relate to supply, not consumer demand. The key idea is that market demand totals the quantities consumers are willing to buy at each price. Question 36. A firm sells to two consumer groups with different willingness to pay, but all consumers face the same price. Which group receives greater consumer surplus? A. Consumers with lower willingness to pay. B. Consumers with no demand. C. Consumers with higher willingness to pay. D. Consumers excluded from the market. The correct answer is C. Let's connect willingness to pay with surplus received. Consumer surplus is the difference between the maximum amount a consumer is willing to pay and the price actually paid. When all consumers pay the same price, those with higher willingness to pay receive greater surplus because the gap between their valuation and the market price is larger. Option A is not correct because lower willingness to pay creates a smaller surplus at the same price. Option B is wrong because consumers with no demand do not receive surplus from buying. Option D is also wrong because excluded consumers do not purchase the good. The main idea is that higher willingness to pay creates greater consumer surplus when the market price is common. Question 37. A price ceiling causes available units to be allocated to buyers with lower willingness to pay, while some higher value buyers cannot obtain the product. What inefficiency occurs? A. Perfect rationing. B. Allocative misallocation. C. Producer surplus maximization. D. Utility independence. The correct answer is B. Let's connect rationing to inefficient allocation. Allocative misallocation occurs when goods do not go to the consumers who value them most. A price ceiling can create a shortage, and when the limited units are allocated by weighting, timing, connections, or luck, some lower value buyers may receive the product while higher value buyers are left out. Option A is not correct because perfect rationing would allocate goods efficiently to the buyers who value them most. Option C is wrong because a price ceiling usually reduces producer surplus rather than maximizing it. Option D is also wrong because utility independence is not the inefficiency described here. The key idea is that price ceilings can prevent scarce goods from reaching the highest value users. Question 38. A landlord cannot legally charge a market clearing rent and instead reduces maintenance quality. Which effect may arise under a binding price restriction? A. Demand elimination. B. Perfect efficiency. C. Supply expansion at every price. D. Quality deterioration. The correct answer is D. Let's connect the rent restriction to the landlord's adjustment. A binding price restriction can prevent sellers from charging the market clearing price. When sellers cannot adjust fully through price, they may adjust through non-price factors such as reducing quality, service, or maintenance. In this case, the landlord responds by lowering maintenance quality, so the effect is quality deterioration. Option A is not correct because demand is not eliminated when rent is kept below the market clearing level. Option B is wrong because binding price restrictions often create inefficiencies. Option C is also wrong because a lower legal price usually discourages supply rather than expanding it at every price. The main idea is that binding price controls can reduce quality as sellers adjust in other ways. Question 39. A market has a vertical supply curve in the short run because quantity cannot be quickly expanded. Demand rises sharply. What is the most likely short-run outcome? A. Price rises while quantity changes little. B. Quantity rises substantially while price stays fixed. C. Price falls while quantity rises sharply. D. Shortage disappears through supply expansion. The correct answer is A. Let's connect fixed short-run supply to the demand increase. A vertical supply curve means quantity supplied is fixed or nearly fixed in the short run. When demand rises sharply, producers cannot quickly expand output, so the adjustment happens mainly through a higher price rather than a much larger quantity. Option B is not correct because quantity cannot rise substantially when supply is vertical. Option C is wrong because stronger demand usually pushes price upward, not downward. Option D is also wrong because supply expansion is limited in the short run. The key idea is that fixed short-run supply makes demand increases show up mainly as price increases. Question 40. Which statement best describes a perfectly inelastic supply curve? A. Quantity supplied changes infinitely with price. B. Supply shifts whenever demand shifts. C. Producers sell nothing at any positive price. D. Quantity supplied does not respond to price changes. The correct answer is D. Let's connect the term perfectly inelastic to producer response. A perfectly inelastic supply curve means the quantity supplied is fixed no matter how the price changes. This often appears as a vertical supply curve because producers cannot increase or decrease quantity in response to price in the relevant period. Option A is not correct because infinite responsiveness describes perfectly elastic supply, not perfectly inelastic supply. Option B is wrong because demand shifts do not automatically shift supply. Option C is also wrong because producers may still sell a fixed quantity at positive prices. The key idea is that perfectly inelastic supply means quantity supplied does not respond to price changes. Question 41. A digital file can be replicated at very low marginal cost after the first copy is produced. Which supply-side feature is most relevant? A. Perfectly fixed physical capacity. B. High fixed cost with low marginal cost. C. Negative marginal utility. D. Consumer income rationing. The correct answer is B. Let's connect digital production to cost structure. Many digital goods require significant initial effort or investment to create, such as developing software, producing a video, or designing a digital textbook. However, once the first version exists, serving one more user, often costs very little. Option A is not correct because digital files are not usually limited by physical capacity in the same way as land or seats in a venue. Option C is wrong because marginal utility relates to consumer satisfaction, not production cost. Option D is also wrong because consumer income rationing concerns buyers, not the firm's supply-side cost structure. The key idea is that digital goods often combine high fixed cost with low marginal cost. Question 42. Evaluate each statement as true or false. Market demand is obtained by adding individual quantities demanded at each price. The correct answer is true. A vertical short-run supply curve means quantity responds strongly to price immediately. The correct answer is false. A binding price restriction can affect product quality as well as quantity traded. The correct answer is true. Consumer surplus is larger for buyers whose willingness to greatly exceeds the market price. The correct answer is true. Let's clarify how these market concepts connect. Market demand is found by horizontally summing individual quantities demanded at each price. A vertical short-run supply curve means quantity is fixed or nearly fixed, so it does not respond strongly to price immediately. A binding price restriction can affect both quantity and quality because sellers may reduce non-price features such as service or maintenance when price adjustment is limited. Consumer surplus is larger when a buyer's willingness to pay is far above the market price. The main idea is that market outcomes depend on demand aggregation, supply responsiveness, price constraints, and differences in buyer valuation. Question 43. A farmer decides how much to plant based on this year's price, but the crop reaches the market next year. Which model best captures this delayed supply response? A. Static budget model. B. Indifference curve model. C. Cobweb model. D. Reservation price model. The correct answer is C. Let's connect the time lag to the market model. The Cobweb model explains markets where producers make supply decisions based on current or past prices, but the output reaches the market later. Farming is a common example because planting decisions happen before the crop is available for sale. Option A is not correct because a static budget model does not focus on delayed supply response. Option B is wrong because indifference curves analyze consumer preferences, not production lags. Option D is also wrong because reservation price refers to a buyer's maximum willingness to pay or a seller's minimum acceptable price. The key idea is that the Cobweb model captures delayed producer responses to price signals. Question 44. In a Cobweb market, repeated price and quantity movements move farther away from equilibrium. What type of adjustment path is this? A. Convergent adjustment. B. Divergent adjustment. C. Static equilibrium. D. Market clearing without lag. The correct answer is B. Let's connect the movement pattern to the type of Cobweb path. A divergent adjustment path occurs when price and quantity changes move increasingly farther away from equilibrium over time. In a Cobweb market, this can happen when delayed production responses overcorrect instead of settling toward the equilibrium point. Option A is not correct because convergent adjustment moves closer to equilibrium over time. Option C is wrong because static equilibrium does not describe repeated movement away from equilibrium. Option D is also wrong because the Cobweb model specifically involves a time lag in supply response. The main idea is that moving farther away from equilibrium indicates a divergent Cobweb path. Question 45. Which condition best describes a stable equilibrium? A. Forces within the market tend to restore the equilibrium after a disturbance. B. Any disturbance causes permanent movement away from equilibrium. C. Quantity demanded is always greater than quantity supplied. D. Price remains unchanged regardless of market pressure. The correct answer is A. Let's connect stability to how a market reacts after a change. A stable equilibrium means that when the market is disturbed, internal market forces tend to push price and quantity back toward equilibrium. For example, if price rises above equilibrium, excess supply can put downward pressure on price. If price falls below equilibrium, excess demand can push price upward. Option B is not correct because that describes an unstable or divergent adjustment path. Option C is wrong because quantity demanded being greater than quantity supplied describes a shortage, not equilibrium stability. Option D is also wrong because a stable equilibrium does not mean price never changes. It means price tends to move back toward equilibrium after a disturbance. The key idea is that stability is about the market's tendency to self-correct. Question 46. A market has two possible equilibria because consumers value the product more when many others use it. Which feature is most relevant? A. Diminishing producer surplus. B. Network effects. C. Perfectly inelastic demand. D. Constant marginal disutility. The correct answer is B. Let's connect user participation to market value. Network effects occur when a product becomes more valuable as more people use it. For example, a messaging app is more useful when many friends, classmates, or coworkers also use it. This can create multiple equilibria because low participation may keep value low, while high participation can make the product much more attractive. Option A is not correct because producer surplus relates to sellers' gains, not user-based value. Option C is wrong because perfectly inelastic demand means quantity demanded does not respond to price. Option D is also wrong because constant marginal disutility is not the feature driving multiple equilibria here. The key idea is that network effects link product value to the number of users. Question 47. A new communication app struggles because few users have joined, making it unattractive despite a low price. What problem does this illustrate? A. Excess producer surplus. B. Coordination problem. C. Perfect market clearing. D. Negative reservation price. The correct answer is B. Let's connect the app's value to user adoption. A coordination problem occurs when a person's decision depends on what others are expected to do. A communication app may be cheap, but if few people use it, each potential user gets little value from joining. Option A is not correct because producer surplus refers to sellers' gains, not the difficulty of attracting users. Option C is wrong because the market is not smoothly clearing around a strong adoption level. Option D is also wrong because a negative reservation price is not the issue. The key idea is that users may hesitate to adopt because the product becomes valuable only when many others adopt it too. Question 48. Which statement best distinguishes partial equilibrium analysis from general equilibrium analysis? A. Partial equilibrium excludes prices. General equilibrium excludes quantities. B. Partial equilibrium applies only to monopolies. General equilibrium applies only to households. C. Partial equilibrium studies one market while holding others constant. General equilibrium studies interdependent markets together. D. Partial equilibrium studies utility only. General equilibrium studies cost only. The correct answer is C. Let's separate the two types of market analysis. Partial equilibrium analysis focuses on one market while treating conditions in other markets as unchanged. For example, it may study the market for rice without fully analyzing changes in labor, transport, or fertilizer markets. General equilibrium analysis looks at how multiple markets interact at the same time, because a change in one market can affect prices and quantities in others. Option A is not correct because both approaches can include prices and quantities. Option B is wrong because neither approach is limited only to monopolies or households. Option D is also wrong because both approaches can involve utility, cost, demand, and supply. The main idea is that partial equilibrium isolates one market while general equilibrium studies market interdependence. Question 49. A rise in fuel prices increases delivery costs for online retailers and reduces household spending on other goods. Why might partial equilibrium analysis be limited here? A. It always requires exact utility numbers. B. It assumes consumers have no preferences. C. It eliminates all supply responses. D. It may ignore linked effects across related markets. The correct answer is D. Let's connect the fuel price change to wider market effects. Partial equilibrium analysis focuses on one market while holding other markets constant. That can be useful for simple cases, but it may be limited when markets are strongly connected. Here, higher fuel prices affect delivery costs for online retailers and also reduce household spending on other goods. Option A is not correct because partial equilibrium does not always require exact utility numbers. Option B is wrong because it does not assume consumers lack preferences. Option C is also wrong because supply responses can still be considered within the market being studied. The key idea is that partial equilibrium may miss broader effects that spread across related markets. Question 50. A consumer chooses between receiving a product today or a larger quantity later. Which concept is most directly involved? A. Market surplus. B. Supply aggregation. C. Intertemporal choice. D. Producer reservation. The correct answer is C. Let's connect the decision to timing. Intertemporal choice involves decisions where a person compares benefits or costs across different time periods. In this case, the consumer is choosing between getting a product now or waiting to receive a larger quantity later. Option A is not correct because market surplus refers to excess supply in a market. Option B is wrong because supply aggregation concerns combining producers' quantities. Option D is also wrong because producer reservation refers to the minimum price a seller would accept, not a consumer's time-based decision. The key idea is that intertemporal choice deals with trade-offs between present and future consumption. Question 51. A consumer strongly prefers present consumption over future consumption, even when the future option is somewhat larger. What does this reveal? A. Perfect complementarity. B. High time preference. C. Zero marginal utility. D. Stable market surplus. The correct answer is B. Let's connect the choice to the value placed on time. High time preference means a consumer places greater value on consumption now rather than consumption later. In this case, the consumer prefers the present option even though the future option is larger, showing a strong preference for immediate consumption. Option A is not correct because perfect complementarity describes goods consumed together in fixed proportions. Option C is wrong because zero marginal utility means an additional unit gives no extra satisfaction. Option D is also wrong because stable market surplus is not about choosing between present and future consumption. The key idea is that high time preference reflects a strong preference for benefits received sooner. Question 52. Which utility function shape is commonly associated with risk aversion? A. Linear supply over output. B. Vertical demand over income. C. Concave utility over wealth. D. Convex cost over quantity only. The correct answer is C. Let's connect gratitude to the shape of utility. Risk aversion is commonly associated with a concave utility function over wealth. This means each additional unit of wealth gives a smaller increase in utility than the previous unit. Because of diminishing marginal utility of wealth, a risk-averse person may prefer a certain amount of wealth over a risky option with the same expected value. Option A is not correct because supply over output does not describe risk preference. Option B is wrong because vertical demand over income is not the standard way to represent risk aversion. Option D is also wrong because cost over quantity concerns production, not utility over uncertain wealth. The key idea is that concave utility reflects risk aversion. Question 53. A person rejects a fair gamble because the possible loss reduces utility more than the equal-sized gain increases utility. Which concept explains the decision? A. Risk aversion. B. Market shortage. C. Producer surplus. D. Supply expansion. The correct answer is A. Let's connect the gamble to the person's attitude toward risk. Risk aversion explains why someone may reject a fair gamble even when the expected monetary value is not negative. If the possible loss reduces utility more than the equal-sized gain increases utility, the person values certainty more than the risky option. Option B is not correct because a market shortage occurs when quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied. Option C is wrong because producer surplus refers to sellers receiving more than their minimum acceptable price. Option D is also wrong because supply expansion describes an increase in output offered by producers. The key idea is that risk-averse people dislike uncertainty when potential losses carry greater utility cost than equivalent gains provide. Question 54. Which statement best describes expected utility theory? A. Market equilibrium is determined only by producer inventory. B. Choices under uncertainty are evaluated using probability-weighted utility outcomes. C. Demand curves are always vertical under risk. D. Utility must be identical for all consumers. The correct answer is B. Let's connect uncertainty to decision-making. Expected utility theory explains how people evaluate risky choices by considering the utility from each possible outcome and the probability of that outcome occurring. A person does not look only at the money involved, but at the satisfaction or value each uncertain result would bring. Option A is not correct because market equilibrium is not determined only by producer inventory. Option C is wrong because risk does not automatically make demand curves vertical. Option D is also wrong because utility differs across consumers based on their preferences. The key idea is that expected utility combines outcome values with probabilities when choices involve uncertainty. Question 55. A worker accepts lower pay for a safer job rather than higher pay for a riskier job. Which interpretation is most consistent with utility theory? A. The worker ignores all non-monetary factors. B. The safer job must have higher producer surplus. C. The risky job has no market demand. D. The worker's utility depends on both income and risk. The correct answer is D. Let's connect the job choice to utility, not just salary. Utility theory allows a person's satisfaction to depend on several factors, including income, safety, effort, time, and risk. In this case, the worker accepts lower pay because the safer job provides enough non-monetary benefit to outweigh the extra income from the riskier job. Option A is not correct because the worker is clearly considering a non-monetary factor. Option B is wrong because producer surplus applies to sellers, not the worker's personal job preference. Option C is also wrong because the risky job may still attract other workers with different preferences. The key idea is that utility can depend on both money and risk exposure. Question 56. Evaluate each statement as true or false. A cobweb model involves delayed supply responses. The correct answer is true. Network effects can support more than one possible equilibrium. The correct answer is true. Expected utility theory ignores probabilities. The correct answer is false. Risk aversion is consistent with diminishing marginal utility of wealth. The correct answer is true. Let's connect each statement to the correct economic concept. A cobweb model involves delayed supply responses because producers often make output decisions before the product reaches the market. Network effects can support multiple equilibria because the value of adoption depends on how many others also participate. Expected utility theory does not ignore probabilities. It uses probabilities to weight the utility of possible outcomes. Risk aversion is consistent with diminishing marginal utility of wealth because a loss can reduce utility more than an equal-sized gain increases it. The main idea is that timing, adoption behavior, uncertainty, and risk preferences all affect economic decision-making. Question 57. A buyer spends time comparing sellers before purchasing because prices differ across platforms. Which friction affects market adjustment? A. Search cost. B. Producer surplus. C. Marginal rate of transformation. D. Perfect information. The correct answer is A. Let's connect the buyer's effort to market friction. Search cost is the time, effort, or money spent finding information about prices, sellers, and alternatives. In this case, the buyer must compare sellers across platforms because prices differ, so the market does not adjust instantly or perfectly. Option B is not correct because producer surplus measures sellers' gain from receiving more than their minimum acceptable price. Option C is wrong because marginal rate of transformation relates to production trade-offs. Option D is also wrong because perfect information would mean buyers already know the relevant prices and alternatives without costly searching. The key idea is that search costs slow market adjustment by making information costly to obtain. Question 58. Which condition is most necessary for the law of one price to hold strongly in a market? A. High search costs and restricted resale. B. Unstable preferences and delayed production. C. Binding price ceilings and rationing. D. Perfect information and low transaction cost. The correct answer is D. Let's connect price uniformity to market conditions. The law of one price is most likely to hold when buyers and sellers can easily compare prices and trade across locations or platforms. Perfect information helps buyers identify cheaper sellers, while low transaction costs make it practical to buy from them. Option A is not correct because high search costs and restricted resale allow price differences to persist. Option B is wrong because unstable preferences and delayed production can make adjustment less predictable. Option C is also wrong because binding price ceilings and rationing interfere with normal price adjustment. The key idea is that price differences are reduced when information and trading are both easy. Question 59. A resale market emerges for concert tickets because original ticket prices were set below many buyers' willingness to pay. What does the resale price tend to reflect? A. Elimination of demand for the concert. B. A collapse of consumer surplus for all buyers. C. Scarcity and higher reservation prices among excluded buyers. D. Perfectly elastic supply of seats. The correct answer is C. Let's connect resale pricing to scarcity and willingness to pay. When original concert ticket prices are set below what many buyers are willing to pay, demand may exceed the number of available seats. A resale market can then emerge because some excluded buyers have higher reservation prices and are willing to pay more to obtain a scarce ticket. Option A is not correct because resale markets usually appear when demand is strong, not eliminated. Option B is wrong because consumer surplus does not collapse for all buyers. Some original buyers may still gain surplus if they paid below their willingness to pay. Option D is also wrong because concert seats are limited, so supply is not perfectly elastic. The main idea is that resale prices often reflect scarcity and strong willingness to pay among buyers who missed out initially. Question 60. A platform reduces transaction costs by verifying sellers, processing payments, and displaying comparable prices. What market effect is most likely? A. Weaker price discovery. B. Permanent shortage at every price. C. More efficient matching between buyers and sellers. D. Elimination of consumer preferences. The correct answer is C. Let's connect lower transaction costs to market coordination. When a platform verifies sellers, processes payments, and displays comparable prices, it becomes easier for buyers and sellers to find and trust each other. This lowers transaction costs and improves price discovery, comparison, and exchange. Option A is not correct because comparable prices usually strengthen price discovery rather than weaken it. Option B is wrong because lower transaction costs do not create a permanent shortage at every price. Option D is also wrong because consumer preferences still exist even when trading becomes easier. The main idea is that lower transaction costs support more efficient matching between buyers and sellers,